Madam Speaker, I move that this House calls for the Minister for Police to cease quoting incorrect statistics and making announcements on recruitment numbers, and instead focus on his job, which is to protect Western Australians from criminal activity. The cornerstone of any successful strategy against violent criminals, indeed against criminals of all kinds, is stable and effective law enforcement. And that's why I find it so perplexing that this police minister seems more focused on maintaining his government's image than addressing underlying criminal problems or crime problems. And never was this attitude more apparent than during question time last week when I asked the Minister about police morale and levels of attrition. Now, I asked my question on Tuesday the 18th of October and with a follow-up on Thursday the 20th of October, and your Police Minister said the following. The Minister said that the Western Australian, I'm quoting here, in fact it's a quote out of the record of Hansard, the Western Australian Police Force recruited 1,306 officers between 2012 and 2016, and there were 1,211 resignations. That was a net increase of 95 officers under the Liberals' last 5 years in office. So what we didn't hear in that was the Minister actually citing the overall change in headcount for police officers, and these are as are known as the sworn officers, between 2012 and 16. Instead, he just did a bit of subtracting of numbers of recruitment and the total resignations of the officers, but that does not tell the story of the headcount in the police department. Now, why would the Minister do that? I mean, this was, it would appear, an attempt to hide what is actually going on in relation to police numbers in that period, and he's trying to contrast to police numbers in this period. But let's look at the facts. Now, I like to use the facts as published by the WA Police Force, and if I look at the numbers from the annual reports from the WA Police Force, and reminding the Minister, he claimed there were just 95 new police officers under the previous Liberal government between those years of 2012 and 2016. Is that true? Well, it's not, based on the police department's own statistics that they publish every year. So the official annual reports of the Western Australian Police Force state that in 2012 there were 5,821 police officers, and in 2016 there were 6,342 police officers in Western Australia. Now, the mathematics is pretty straightforward. That is an increase of 521 police officers, not 95, 521 police officers during that period. Now, if we look at the, and as I say, five times more than was stated by the Minister. So I don't know why the Minister would come into this place, try and contrast or somehow puff up what he sees as performance under his own government and misrepresent the numbers that were actually published in the police period. Now, you know, the Minister then went on to boast about, under this Labor government, that you'd seen 481 police officers. And can I say, in terms of achievement, a lower increase, by some distance, a lower increase than was achieved under a shorter period in the previous Liberal government. So far from being some gotcha point for the opposition, the Minister's doing some outstanding a job in relation to recruitment. What we see is that misstatement of those correct numbers is in fact, in fact, it was deliberately trying to hide the poor performance of this government and this Minister in relation to it. Now, I followed up with the Minister in question time. I gave the Minister the opportunity to correct that particular point, and yet the Minister did not take that opportunity to, in fact, correct it. Now, you know, if the Minister's got a beef with his own department's statistics, then I suggest that he takes that up with that department. But he shouldn't come into this place, misquote statistics, and misdirect the people in this parliament and otherwise in Western Australia. Now, if we go, and as I sort of pointed out, I gave the minister that chance. The minister was clearly a bit embarrassed, and then he tried to deflect attention. Instead, he was talking about the economy, he was talking about WA workforce participation rate. But and when I look at that, I say, so, and I've raised this and I've made this comment in this place, but, you know, is the minister saying the only reason that the WA police force numbers or the police force are suffering high attrition is that it's purely due to the WA economy, it's purely due to the WA workforce participation rate? Because what is very clear in talking to the police, and my colleague, the Honourable Peter Collier in the other place, spends an extensive amount of time talking to the police, given his shadow responsibility. What is readily apparent is that those are not the reasons that police are leaving the police force, and this has been reinforced by some recent publicity on this matter. They're doing it because morale in the police force is at record lows. But what we saw was the publication of a survey from the police force of a third of the police force, 2,000 officers in the police force in May, where the majority of those, in fact 60% of those officers surveyed, 2,000 out of 6,000. This is no idle sort of, they passed something around the office and, you know, got a few people to make comments. This is a substantial survey. 60% of those police officers believed that morale in the force was bad. Now, the minister comes in here and says, well, you know, you're saying morale is bad, you hate police. As I've pointed out again in this place, I have the deepest respect for the police and the deepest admiration, having worked with them for 6.5 years of my career when I first started employment in my role as a forensic scientist, not as a police officer. And I have the deepest respect for them, and that's why I'm so concerned about those cultural issues that are afflicting the police force. And for the minister to sort of discount this and say, well, it's only because of those other things, means the minister's not doing his job. He's not going and talking to those police officers. The minister's job is not only to talk to the police commissioner. The minister and his department's job is to understand what's happening in that force and make sure that it's in peak shape, not just with new equipment, not just with new cameras, but it's in peak shape. And it feels, those police officers feel they're valued, they feel they're not being inappropriately, having their shifts, for example, inappropriately changed, and that those police officers feel that they're being treated with respect by the police department. Now, I'll look a little bit further into those attrition numbers in the police force, but I might say there's a sense of déjà vu here, members, and that is it's exactly the same as we hear around the nurses. We hear the Minister for Health telling us that the only reason the nurses are striking is because it's some sort of grubby union tactic to try and strong-arm the government in a union negotiation. But if you talk to those nurses and midwives, what you understand is that they are deeply upset by the way they're being treated by this government, but also they're deeply concerned about cultural issues within the hospital. That's the thing that is distressing them most in the dispute that they're having with the government. Now, if we look at the issue of attrition and also the promises that this government made, in 2020 the McGowan-Labor Government promised 950 additional police officers over and above attrition for the next 4 years. Now, for financial year 2020-2021, it was supposed to be 350 new police officers. Now, the actual headcount for that time was only 290 police officers, so the government did not achieve, even in the first year, close to that. In fact, there are 60 police officers short of their target then. Now, if we go to the next financial year, 21-22, the target was another 200 police officers. Only 80 more police officers were recruited against this much vaunted target. And we hear again and again that this government's doing something about crime because of the 950 officers. But again, the second year, that has fallen short by officers. So then this financial year, 22-23, another target. What's happened this year? Well, this year what we see is that in fact numbers in the police force are down from the previous year by 110. Not up, down by 110. So the great boast of net recruitment, in fact, is going backwards, and so we've gone from 7,007 down to 6,897. Now, that's the real answer. That's the real answer under this minister. And I can see why he might try and put the previous government in a bad light in relation to the numbers, but the minister shouldn't be coming into this place and misleading us in relation to those numbers. The minister should instead be focusing on the issues within his force. Now that is, as I said, if we look at all of those targets, if we actually look at the targets, we should have had 7,187 new police officers in the force at the end of last year, and instead we're 180 officers short. And as I say, what we've seen now is this drop in the number of police officers in the police force. And that's obviously not missed by members of the press in relation to articles about this, and that is we've got a government that says it wants to do something. It's obsessed with spin, and that's the reality. Obsessed with trying to paint a good picture, but not as obsessed with actually doing something meaningful about the actual situation that they face. And why is this so important? The reason this is important is that behind all of these statistics are the real human stories of what is happening under this government in relation to the serious crimes, and the most serious crimes are crimes against the person, or what we would typically refer to, or colloquially refer to, as violent crime. And if we see under this government, and as I've revealed in question time today, what we've seen is an explosion of violent crime. Now, the answer, the sort of, again, it's an attempt to try and spin this away. The answer that this is purely a reflection of the population increase is clearly a nonsense. Under this government, violent crime has increased, and this is crime against the person, that's what I'm referring to as violent crime, has increased by 17%. So we've gone from 46,025 in 2016-17 to 53,000, almost 986, almost 54,000 in 2021-22. That's an increase of 7,961. Now, I don't for a moment think that the level of crime against the person was an acceptable rate under the previous government, and clearly that was far too high. But as I say, what we've seen under this government is an explosion in this. And in another occasion, when I have more time, we'll dig a little bit more into some of the underlying factors in relation to this. But this is a crisis and a catastrophe. Now, I won't cover the grounds that my other colleagues are going to cover in relation to crime in regional areas. But all I can say is, Minister, Operation Shield is not working. Is not working at all. Operation Shield may have your operation north of Geraldton to deal with crime, and you've got these extra resources. The extra resources. No, well, Minister, I tell you what, let's have an argument about the semantics of the name, but I can tell you what, it's not working. If you go to Carnarvon, if you go to Kununurra, you go to Halls Creek, Fitzroy Crossing or Broome, it's not working, and demonstrably not working. And you'll hear more about that from the other members today. And we can see in every category of crime, you focus on that, Minister, because clearly that's your bent. In every category of crime, in this state, there are substantial increases. Now, the most serious category of crime are crimes within the home, and that is those are family and domestic violence and related crimes in the home. But in every other category of crime, we're seeing substantial increases, and these crimes are terrifying, these crimes against the person. Some of the crimes sound like they're out of some horrendous dystopian movie, and time prevents me from going through this in detail, but it is quite clear that the government is failing to take action, and in communities where there are crimes being committed, people are committing crimes again and again and again. The same people are committing crimes again and again and again without effective action from this government. And as I say, the level, the severity, and it's in every suburb. We can go through all the suburbs. We can look at Maylands, Edgewater, Gosnells, Greenwood, Atwell, Midland, North Perth, Coongamire, Midland, Ashfield, Bentley. Now, some of those names may ring a bell for members in this House because those are places and electorates that you represent in the lower house. And I can give that for all the areas. I don't know how you go to your communities and explain what you're doing and what your minister is doing and what your government is doing to deal with violent crime. And if you go from north of Geraldton, then it is genuinely a catastrophe at every level. Youth whose lives are being effectively stolen from them, and communities that are living in fear. We saw, and as I say, I won't cover that ground in detail, but it is a catastrophe of escalating proportions. Now, I think the problem for this government is that your landslide result in 2021 has lured this government into a state of complacency. You actually don't think you have to do anything. You actually think you can just spin your way out of problems without, in fact, being open with the people of Western Australia. You think 5.5 years in you can blame the previous government, but the truth is that this government is doing insufficient to deal with the serious crimes that are happening in this state of Western Australia, and the people of Western Australia are suffering for it.